Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. All praise is surely due to Allah. We send the prayers and peace of Allah upon His final messenger, Muhammad. Upon him be all forms of peace. Now that we've covered a couple of words, 3 words, some terminology, I want to talk briefly about the content of Islam. The trial which we all face in seeking the truth is getting distracted from the real issues with the trivial issues. Because the content of Islam, the message of all the messengers of Allah, of whom there were thousands throughout the history of mankind, 25 of whom we know by name, all of whom came with the same teaching from the same source. We Muslims, we have a natural aversion when we hear somebody say, the Lord of this place, or the Lord of this people, or the Lord of this age, when there is no such thing. There's only one Lord. And this is very, very serious. Or let me put it this way. If you don't believe it yet, let's just say, even if it's 1 in a million, why would you take that chance? Why would you not spend a little time in your life and say, is there any credibility to this claim? Maybe it's an outrageous claim to you, and especially if you are a product of Christian culture, it's natural for a rational person to want to throw this away. Because so much of what was given to you was so irrational. And because the religion of Paulism, which has nothing to do with Isa, the son of Maryam, who is erroneously called Jesus, and that's not his name. His name is Isa, not just in Arabic, in his own language, maybe a slight variation in pronunciation. His name is not Jesus. We shouldn't even say this name, because one of the most prominent theories about this name Jesus is that it's an acronym. It's an abbreviation. And what it stands for is, may his name be forever forgotten and never remembered. Now let me explain this. These were not malicious people who referred to him in this way. These were Jews who were monotheistic. And the true teachings of Isa had been lost to the world, and the polytheistic teachings of Paul and his cronies had assumed the name Christianity. And the Jews who still understood the Shema, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one God, naturally and of course absolutely abhorred this pagan belief of a deity with an offspring and 3 in 1 and 1 in 3. This is absolute apostasy. This is absolute antithesis of the message of Abraham and Moses and Dawood and Adam and Noah and every prophet through the ages. You cannot get farther from the message of the messengers to say God had a son, or part of God is God and part of God is a human being walking on the earth, eating and excreting. You can't get farther from that. So in their shock and abhorrence at this innovation, this horrific myth that had been perpetrated and falsely attributed to the noble messenger Isa, the son of Maryam, some of the Jewish scholars in their writings, instead of writing any name at all, used to write, may his name be effaced and never remembered. And they didn't mean to insult Isa, the son of Maryam, or maybe the knowledge had gotten lost and they no longer even realized that this man was a prophet and a messenger of Allah. But what they were hearing was this horrific polytheistic abomination of deities having offspring and being split in 3 parts and reunited back to 1 part. And so they called him, may his name be effaced and never remembered. And this was eventually truncated down to Jesus. His name is Isa. Let's call him by his name. May the greatest peace of Allah be upon the messenger Isa, one of the 5 greatest ever. So, as I said, this question is so serious. Don't get distracted by a legacy of Christianity which turned religion into a monster, which boiled people in oil and burned them at the stake and committed genocide in the Middle East, a long time ago. And all of these horrific things, so that rational people said, we have to get rid of religion. Well, you can't get rid of it because people won't give it up. So push it to the side. And it has nothing more to do with real life. And actually that was part of the content of Paulism in the first place, because he abolished the law. Isa, the son of Maryam, upheld the law, although some changes and modifications were decreed by the Creator in his mission. But in general, he upheld the circumcision, he upheld the dietary laws, he upheld the moral and sexual laws of the prophets before him. But not Paul. Paul said all you need is faith without deeds. And it's all in your heart, and it's just a fuzzy feeling, and it's just whatever. Because he had to appease the Romans, because the beef between the followers of the prophet and the Romans was that the Romans said Caesar is God, and Caesar is the law. And if you have any other law besides Caesar, we're going to cut you in pieces and nail you onto trees and do horrific things. Go read the history. It's beyond belief. Alright? So the content of Islam is that we testify to two things. First we testify, we say ashhadu an, that means I testify that, so put that aside, to the content, La ilaha illallah. Now you already know most of these words because he defined them for you. La, there is no. Ilaha, what does that mean? Anybody remember? What's ilaha mean? Ilah, what does it mean? A God, with a small g if you will. La ilaha illa, except Allah. Now, the first thing we testify to is there is no ilah. Now, he said we can't translate Allah. As a matter of fact, we can't even translate ilah into English. Because ilah means someone who is something which is an object of ta'lih, which means that you revere and obey and submit to and worship this object. That's an ilah. And that's why you find people translating it differently. Some people say, no God but Allah. And some people say, no God but God. Well, that's confusing. Alright? And some people say, no deity but God or Allah. You're trying to clear it up a little bit. And some say, none worthy of worship but Allah. So they're trying to get at a meaning which again is impossible in English. La ilaha means do not make ta'lih. Do not make this act of, well, we all know what it is. Mankind has had this since day one. Until this century, there's very few human beings who don't believe in a deity. That was never the issue. The issue was monotheism versus intercessors and intermediaries and all that. In our century now, we have a lot of people saying, no such thing. This is fairly unique in human history. There hasn't been many times in human history when anybody said such a thing. Idol worshippers didn't say such a thing. The idol worshippers in Mecca didn't say such a thing. They said, إِنَّمَا نَعْبُدُهَا لِيُقَرِّبُونَ إِلَى اللَّهِ زُلْفَى. They said, why do you go to these idols, 360 idols in the Kaaba? Why do you go there and give them things and whatever you do there? They said, we only do that to try to get closer to who? Allah. So Muhammad didn't bring this word. They already had the word. Allah. And that's who he was. La ilaha is a negation of ta'lih for anyone else. And Allah, in this instruction to us, put negation before affirmation. We don't say, Allah is my Lord and no other. No. We say, no other but Allah. He put negation first. Why? Because the essence of the message of all the prophets is to free yourself from slavery to all false objects, to the pure liberation of pure slavery to the one and only Ilah.